What's up, guys? Mason the Brock Henderson here, and I hope you guys had a happy 4th of July. This is my first video post 4th of July, so it's been a little minute since I recorded anything. But I'm going to start off talking about the most patriotic MCU film, Thor Love and Thunder. And I'm going to go ahead and do it the way I've been doing all of my MCU reviews. Start off talking about my overall thoughts with no spoilers, and then we'll get into the spoiler talk. So, overall thoughts, it was okay. There's a lot about this film that works at times and then doesn't work at other times. So, for instance, the romance in it, it works, and then it doesn't work at times. And then the action, actually the action works throughout. That's probably the one thing that Marvel typically does really well throughout an entire film, or even some of the series. Like, they tend to do the action pretty well. But, you know, the drama in it, it was good, and then it wasn't good. You know, the humor, it was good, and then it wasn't good. So there's a lot that kind of goes back and forth in this film that you will enjoy parts of it. If you kind of just turn your brain off, I'm sure it'll probably just be a fun time for you. You don't really have to think too hard about it. It's not one that really gets you, I guess, emotionally invested, and like you really have to think about what they're trying to say. No, it's mostly just kind of another fun romp, similar in the vein of Ragnarok, except there are a lot more, I guess, heartfelt moments as well, because it is the return of Jane Foster and that romance between her and Thor that was built up in the first two movies. But I will say, if you're somebody that you really like the MCU, you really like Marvel comics, I assume, I personally am not a fan of the, like, when I say not a fan of the comics, I mean I haven't read them. I do feel like there's a lot in here that probably goes against the comics, but definitely goes against what we've seen previously in the MCU. There's a lot in this that I feel like is Taika Waititi doing his own thing, which is perfectly fine, except that this is a running series of movies, and if you change your main character this much, it does sort of feel like it's not really the same Thor that we've seen previously. Similar to the one in Ragnarok, but even more stupid in this film, in my opinion. So, yeah, there's a lot about it that it's okay, it's good, you'll have a good time for the most part, but if you're somebody that really gets nitpicky and you're somebody that really digs into these films and wants to use your brain and not just shut it off for 2 hours, you may have some issues with it. It won't be in your bottom, like, 10 Marvel films, probably, but it's definitely not going to be in your top 15, for sure. So yeah, that's just my personal opinion on it without any spoilers. So go check out the film, see what you think, and then come on back, because now we're going to get into these spoilers, and that is a big spoiler warning, so if you don't want to know anything about this film, go ahead and click off now. Yeah, so first of all, let's talk about the good stuff. We'll start with good stuff. Jane and Gore. Their stories, for me, are what really carried the film. And that's not saying that the humor didn't make me laugh, but I feel like the humor, similar to Ragnarok, is most of the time used as a crutch for these films. There's just something about the way that they write this story, and I don't know if it's Taika Waititi or if it's, you know, whoever's writing for Thor now, but it feels like they don't really want to get into the heartfelt emotional stuff and really make you feel, so they'll counterbalance it with a lot of humor. And like I said, sometimes it made me laugh, but I really look at this final scene with Jane and Gore. You know, Jane is dying from her cancer. Gore is getting his daughter back, but he's not going to live, so she's going to go be with Thor as essentially her adoptive father. That scene should make me feel something. And I didn't, because most of the film just felt like a parody, honestly. Like, there's just, I don't really know how to explain it well, but there's something about the way that they wrote the film, the way it was directed, the way that they sort of undercut a lot of more serious moments with humor, that by the end of it, I wasn't really emotionally invested. I feel like that's the biggest flaw that I have with the movie, because the Gore and Jane stuff was the best part for me. Like, I look at Jane's story, she's somebody that wasn't even in the last film, and her romance with Thor wasn't the best part of the first two films. Like, they didn't do a great job of it, but it's something that they could have made me care about again, especially considering she's dying. Like, that is something, it's the first love that Thor had in these movies, so it would make sense, yeah, maybe make him a bit more grounded. He's kind of lost as a character. He doesn't really know what he wants to do post Endgame. Like, does he want to just go be a hero? Does he want to go out with the Guardians, help people? Like, what does he want to do? Giving this sort of weighted story with Jane, where now she's dying, but then Mjolnir helps her and gives her the powers of Thor to keep her alive, but it's not really. It's actually kind of hurting her in the process and speeding up the decay of the cancer. Like, that is an emotional story. And so when you get to the end and he loses her, yeah, it's like a reunion, but not for long. And I do like the one line that Star-Lord had earlier in the film where it's like, you got to feel shitty about something. Like, that's a good line. It's something that a lot of people, I think, try to avoid. They try to avoid close connections because when things go bad, if you do lose them, you'll feel shitty. And not everybody wants that, but the truth is that's kind of what life is about. Like, you go through and you make these connections, and yeah, sometimes bad things happen, but at least you had those connections to begin with. It's better to feel bad about losing something than to not have ever had it. And I feel like that was a really good lesson, but it just got lost because half of it was focused on, oh, well, she's got Mjolnir, and, oh, Thor, he sees his old hammer. Is he going to get his old hammer? Oh, Stormbreaker's jealous. Like, what was that story? I'll get to talking more detail about that later, but what was that story? So I feel like they really lacked something there for Jane, and for Gore, I feel like they really did a weird job of writing him. Because at the beginning, I was actually fully invested. Like, Christian Bale's acting is obviously pretty top-notch. Like, sometimes it's a little wonky, but he's typically a good actor, and I feel like he really did a good job of bringing the emotion in the opening scene where he's losing his daughter, and you see him go to this, oasis with the god that he worshipped, that he felt like betrayed him. And I was fully on board. I'm like, okay, yeah, I've got the understanding of what's going on. He felt betrayed. This sword appears to have corrupted him and convinced him that all gods need to die. I'm on board. What are we going to do with it? Well, for most of the movie, he's hardly in it. We see him a couple scenes. We see him take the children. We see a scene where he randomly decides to scare the children in like the goofiest It clown possible way. He's just sitting there like laughing. He rips the head off a snake and talk. And I'm like, that would have worked if the movie overall was more dark humor, but it was not. This was the only dark humor moment, so it just felt out of place. And he just felt kind of a cartoony villain until the very end, whenever Thor convinces him not to use his wish to kill all the gods and wished for his daughter back. And then all of a sudden, he's back to being an emotionally compelling villain. That's a problem. When you only have the beginning and the end where he feels like the same character, that's a problem. And I don't really get why they have this difficulty. Like, you have plenty to go off of as far as, like, writing sense. It's not like you have, oh, well, we just gotta guess what type of character he is in this scene. He's gonna be a goofy villain in this scene. Oh, well, we gotta have a, villain for this scene. He's gonna be a slightly intimidating villain for this scene. Like, it felt like he changed in almost every scene. So I don't know if that was acting choice from Bale or if it was just poor directing and that, well, we need this scene to have a little bit of humor in it, so let's have Gore act funny, in a dark humor sort of way. So yeah, those two stories for me, they were both the best and worst parts because they were good, but they also showed me the potential of what this movie could have been, and I feel like that sort of made me wish there was more, that they did a lot better job of making me care about these two characters instead of just undercutting so much of it with humor or, as in Gore's sake, just randomly changing his character all throughout the entire movie. So, but yeah, let's go ahead and start digging into some of the humor elements. The Mjolnir Stormbreaker thing. I get it. I get the comedy in it. The first and second-ish scenes made me laugh. Because the first one, it was funny. He's trying to get Mjolnir, and then Stormbreaker, it's almost like he called Stormbreaker thinking he was trying to call Mjolnir. But it looks like, jealous girlfriend, like, what are you doing? Like, that was funny. And even the second one, when he's sitting talking to Mjolnir, like, the way that Stormbreaker sort of entered in off-screen, very threatening to see an axe sort of float in like that. Those two scenes, they made me laugh. And then it just kept going. and kept going to the point where now Stormbreaker, he can't use the Bifrost using Stormbreaker because Stormbreaker is jealous. So these hammer and axes are now sentient? Like, is that... That's not a thing. Why is that suddenly a thing? Like, he's pouring beer on it, tickling its chin. This is not a thing. And especially because you wrote your ending to revolve around the villain using Stormbreaker to open the gate. So if Thor can't use Stormbreaker effectively because it's jealous of his past relationship with Mjolnir, then how come Gorr can suddenly use Stormbreaker effectively? Like, if you're gonna make your axe sentient, you can't also have it be used by the villain in a way that Thor can't even use it right now because, oh, it's mad at him. Like, that doesn't make any sense. And I get it's kind of a funny thing, and maybe you're not supposed to think too hard about it. But at the same time, if it doesn't make sense in the own logic that you created in your universe, it's kind of a problem. And I'm not saying that, like, Marvel has always played, like, exactly in the... I mean, look at this film. Suddenly now there's this place in the middle of the universe where if you go there and you're the first one there, you can apparently have a wish. So Thanos could have gotten there. He could have, used the Bifrost or whatever. He could have opened it and then got his wish and said, I wish that half of the universe was gone. He could have gone and done that if that even existed previously before this movie, but obviously it did not, because until the writers wrote it in this one, it did not exist. So, yes, obviously sometimes Marvel, they do sort of change things up to make a story work, but in this case, you've written this logic that the axe can be faulty, it cannot be used if it does not want to be used by the current person holding it. You wrote that into the film, and then you have the villain use it later on, even though it's supposedly more sentient than just being used by anybody. So I don't know. It was something that sort of frustrated me because, again, I don't want to just shut my brain off and not think going into a film, but that's kind of what this film felt like it wanted me to do. It's like, no, don't think too hard about it. Gorr has it now, so now he can use it. Don't know how. Don't know how he's worthy enough to wield it, because I thought Thor was the only one that could do that. But yeah, sure, he's powerful enough to wield it, and he's powerful enough to be able to use it, and also his little shadow creature things can hold it down, and it will still be used. It just, whatever. The stuff with the Land of the Gods. This whole scene just felt so pointless. Like, yes, they get Zeus's lightning bolt, and that's something that gets used a bit later on. But aside from that, it felt so pointless. It really could have been more of a heist situation where they're like, we got to get Zeus's lightning bolt, and they go and ask him, he says no, and then they're like, all right, we got to go steal it. Like, that could have been a bit more fun. But as it was, it just felt kind of random, pointless, and way too long. Like, there was such a long scene of Thor sitting there chained to the ground while he's trying to talk to Zeus and trying to convince him to join them and that they need help. That scene, I was getting fidgety. I'm sitting there going, okay, can we get this moving, please? Yeah, Thor's naked. Haha, funny. Can we get this going, please? Like, it felt so long, and then he takes down the lightning bolt and he's like, can we use it? Throws it around the room. He's doing tricks with them. Like, haha, funny. Yeah, he's showing he can do everything, and he's gonna say no at the end of all this, right? Get on with it. Get on. It just felt so unnecessary, and I just feel like I don't know, they just needed to pad the runtime. So like, let's have some funny jokes with Russell Crowe as Zeus, and it'll be funny. And what was the point of all of it? Aside from getting the lightning bolt, which, again, that could have been a lot faster, I feel like they didn't really have an idea of what they wanted to do. And then, of course, at the end, they're like, oh, well, Zeus is mad now, so we're going to show the people to fear us again. Hercules, go get him. Which I will say, I'm excited to see Hercules, because, Roy Kent, Ted Lasso. It's going to be great. I still got to watch season 2 of Ted Lasso. I might do a review of that. But yeah, it felt... It's just... Pointless is kind of the main word that I can think of when I think of that whole segment. It felt pointless. There's even a scene where it looks like, oh, is Korg dead? And then all of a sudden, no, he's just a face now. then why have a scene where you make us think he's dead? Is Zeus dead? Nope, at the end he's perfectly fine. So why have a scene where you make us think that Zeus is dead? There's even a scene later on where Valkyrie gets stabbed. It's like, is Valkyrie dead? Nope, she's fine. So why have a scene where you make us think that Valkyrie is dead? Like, all of these things that don't make sense, don't fit into the plot, they just weigh down the movie. And again, because of how good the other two stories were with Jane and Gore, all of these scenes feel so unnecessary and feel so much like baggage that the film doesn't need. You don't need to weigh it down with all this unnecessary humor, because again, I wasn't laughing at half of this stuff. So it's not even accomplishing the real purpose, which is to counteract the dark stuff with making you laugh. Well, if I'm not laughing, then you're not doing your job there. So I don't know. I mean, the audience that I was seeing it with in the theater, they seemed to enjoy it perfectly fine. There was a good bit of laughing going on. So maybe I'm in the minority here. Maybe I'm one of the few people that thought that they really did a poor job of balancing the movie and making it feel like a cohesive narrative. But I just feel like they really don't get, I think, what makes a good, I guess, balanced movie. You know, because we've seen a lot of MCU films that do a good job of balancing the darker stuff with the lighter stuff. You know, they have their jokes, they have their moments to laugh, they have their little, one-liner, but they have those moments, but they'll also have a lot of other stuff that fits together. It feels like it all fits within the same story. It doesn't feel like it's weird changes of tone out of nowhere. It feels cohesive. This did not. This felt like it was a ton of stuff. Sometimes it was a comedy movie. Sometimes it was a romance movie. Sometimes it was a romantic comedy. Sometimes it was a drama. Sometimes it was an adventure movie. Sometimes it was an action movie. It just felt all over the place. And it feels like they just sort of threw everything up on the screen and just what sticks. And unfortunately, when you do that, you have a hodgepodge of a mess that doesn't work together. So overall, I mean, like I said, I still enjoyed parts of it. It's still not nearly as bad as Dark World. I mean, Dark World was really, like, one of the worst Marvel movies. If Eternals did not exist, it probably would be the worst Marvel movie. But even that, I feel like, had a more cohesive narrative. It's kind of the argument between the sequels and the prequels for Star Wars. Like, the sequels were bad in the sense that there wasn't a cohesive narrative because, obviously, they changed directors for the second movie. But the prequels, like, yes, there was one cohesive narrative. It all fit together in the same movie, very much like Dark World, but just the story and the acting and a lot of the stuff that George Lucas threw into there, it made it work not as movies. So it's the comparison I'm making there. This is the prequels or the sequels of Star Wars where it's not good, but they feel like a decently made movie in the sense that there are good things in there. And the prequels are like Dark World because, yes, it's a better cohesive narrative, but it's definitely a worse movie. But yeah, so that's kind of my overall thoughts of it. Trying to think of some other random scenes that stood out. The Screaming Goats, I thought that meme had died, but I guess they're trying to bring it back for whatever reason because it wasn't annoying enough the first time it was a meme, so let's do it again. The Guardians cameo at the beginning felt kind of weird and out of place. Like, my uncle was talking about it because I went and saw it with my uncle, my cousin, and my girlfriend. And he was even saying, like, they felt different. They felt like they were not the same Guardians of the Galaxy that we had come to know. And I have to agree with that. Like, it definitely felt as though they were parodies of themselves. And honestly, I mean, Thor himself is almost a parody at some points. Like, there are moments where it feels like he's just, oh, this is funny Thor. You know, this is Thor who thinks with his muscles, not his brain. Like, that's kind of the gist that I got from some of the scenes in this is we're just going to do a parody of these characters. We're going to do a parody of Thor. We're going to do a parody of the Guardians. We're going to do a parody of Valkyrie. It just felt kind of dumb. Like, Valkyrie doing the commercials at the beginning. What was that? That was odd. Oh, I forgot to mention the Thor. Something that was honestly brought to my attention after the fact. It's something that I didn't realize I was having a problem with. Because you know how sometimes you watch a movie and you feel like there's just something going wrong. You're not really sure what, but you know that there's something wrong and you can't put your finger on it. Well, Thank you to Jeremy Johns, one of the YouTubers I follow. He actually did a really good job of pointing it out to me. Thor feels like he's regressed in this movie. Like, if you look at the beginning of this movie, and he's very much kind of similar to where he was at the beginning of Thor 1. You know, this sort of arrogant, like, I'm just so good, doesn't really care about collateral damage. It's essentially back to where he was there. You know, yes, it's not so much the young, like, I'm going to take on the world. Like, that's kind of where he was at Thor 1. Here, it's more so like he's just so, I'm just so cool, and he's very, yes, I can handle this, and it's perfectly fine. Just remember this as the day. And it's not so much like young arrogance as it's more, I've seen everything and done everything arrogance. I killed Thanos arrogance. Like, he seems a little bit more ignorant than arrogant at times at the beginning of this. But that in itself is still a problem because you've taken him back. And by the end of it, yes, he's a father now, but I don't really see that he's learned his lesson. Like, when they're going to save this group of people, like, is he actually going to go in and help them and not mess anything up, or is he going to go in with the same swagger that he has in every other part of this movie and maybe mess things up again? Who knows? And I feel like that's something that they didn't really tackle by the end of the movie, and it's kind of a sin for the movie itself. So yeah, any other things? The other problem is I saw this movie on Friday and it's now Monday, so you know how they say, like, half of the movie is gone by the time you walk out of the theater. I'm really trying my best to remember everything that I can. The scene with the kids at the end, kind of funny, but also felt, again, kind of parody-ish. Like, oh yes, he gives them all the power of Thor, and then they all can fight using lightning weapons. And I'm like, okay, so now we're having kids fight the battles because, haha, funny. We're having Thor face off against the God Killer, the God Butcher, and we're really just throwing in this random, the kids are fighting funny moment. Again, the tone, completely all over the place. No sense of what they're trying to do. I think that's honestly about it. Obviously, there's a lot of little things in the movie that some of it made me laugh, some of it didn't. You can really get a sense of whether or not you're going to like the movie probably about 10 minutes in. You know, after the whole thing with the Guardians, after kind of what they're building up with Korg and seeing what they're doing, like, oh, Lady Sif. Lady Sif shows up. She has this moment where her arm's cut off, and it kind of has a funny line where she's like, I want to die in the battlefield so I can go to Valhalla. And Thor's like, oh, actually, that's so if you died during the battle's over, so you wouldn't. She's like, shit. So, I mean, that was kind of funny, but then she's gone, and then at the end we see her fighting with Heimdall's son with one arm, so I'm like, okay, so she was just pushed to the side again. Are we just ignoring Thor's friends? Because we killed all of them off in the last movie except for Lady Sif, and in this one, she's just 2 scenes throughout the entire movie. What are we doing? So, yeah, again, after Ragnarok and Love and Thunder are completely different feels to the Thor we saw in 1 and 2, and honestly, even in a lot of the Avengers movies. Like, he feels like a different character at times, and I feel like that's something they either need to correct or they need to stop trying to tie it back to those first 2 movies, because you're not doing a good job of doing that. You know, if you want to make these comparisons to the first 2 movies, you gotta make us feel like we're in the same universe as those first 2 movies, but it doesn't feel like that at all. It feels like we're in a completely different timeline where Thor, kind of like the what-if Thor, who grew up as like a party frat bro, like that's kind of what he feels like at times. It feels like that's the Thor we're seeing now, so I don't know. I guess we'll see what they decide to do with the next. I know at the end they said Thor will return, so I guess he's getting a 5th movie. Hopefully it's somewhat more cohesive than this one, but I don't know. We'll see. With all that being said, that's my thoughts on the movie. So let me know what you guys think down in the comment section. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. What were your thoughts on the film overall? What do you want to see going forward with Thor? Let me know all that. We can talk about it. All that good stuff. Leave a like and subscribe for future MCU reviews, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.